So I gave birth, which is crazy, but honestly, it was a lot better than I expected. So today I'm gonna be telling you guys my birth story. I have my phone because I have it down to the detail, down to everything that went down. I'm not gonna remember off the top of my head, so I wrote everything down, and I've never had a fear of childbirth itself. I will say pregnancy for me was miserable, absolutely horrible, throwing up every day, multiple times a day, did not feel like myself. The actual birth part was actually really enjoyable. Like, I would give birth 8 times if I knew it was gonna be like that every time. Right now, little man is asleep, and I'm hoping he kind of stays asleep while I film this video. I'll be super distracted if he's with me, but maybe he'll make an appearance. I don't know. So I ended up going a day past my due date, which was the longest day of my life. I literally cried, I prayed, and I was like, Lord, please do not let me go over like a week, 2 weeks. I've heard women go like 41 plus weeks, and I'm just like, I can't do it. Pregnancy was so miserable for me. Like, I just wasn't expecting it to be that bad. I feel like no one ever warned me. Like, I've only seen like cute pictures and stuff, so I didn't want to go any longer than I had to. But I gave birth at 40 weeks in 1 day, so it was only 1 day, but it was the longest day of my life. Every time I go to the bathroom, I was looking for labor signs like mucus plug or bloody show or anything, and I was doing curb walking, tea, dates, pineapple, like all of the hacks and tricks to like soften your cervix and like prepare. I don't think it worked. I wasn't early, but you know, do whatever you want to do. I was basically like ready to go. And for context, I did have a labor scare at 34 weeks. I ended up being okay, but that made the rest of the pregnancy feel so much longer because I was like, oh, I'm gonna be so early. Like, I almost gave birth at 34 weeks. Surely I'm gonna be early. No, I was late. So July 24th at like midnight, I couldn't sleep, so I went downstairs to watch Grey's Anatomy. I was on a Grey's Anatomy binge, and I ended up falling asleep. And I woke up at 2 in the morning with shooting cramps, like shooting sharp pain, but I thought it was a dream. Like, I thought I was in surgery because I was watching Grey's Anatomy, so I literally thought I was having like an operation performed on my stomach. That's really dramatic, but that's what I thought. So I didn't get up immediately because I was like, oh, this is a dream, it's not real. Well, then I was like, okay, wait, this might be like labor. And my water didn't break, but I was having those strong cramps, and I'd never experienced that kind of discomfort before. It wasn't like pain yet, but it just felt like, you know, they say that you'll know, and I hate to tell you, but yeah, you will just know. You will know. It feels different. It is kind of like a period cramp, but stronger. Like, that's the best explanation that I have. So I started timing them, and they were every 5 minutes for 1 minute, and I knew that meant it was time to go in. I waited for like an hour just to make sure I wasn't trying to make something happen, you know, like when you want it so bad, like you just want to give birth, like you're over it. So I was like, let me just make sure that these are consistent. And I had been having consistent Braxton Hicks for weeks, so I was like, maybe these are just Braxton Hicks but a little bit stronger, I don't know. Well, then I was like, okay, I think these are real. So I went upstairs and I woke up my husband at 3 in the morning, and I was like, babe, I think it's time. And honestly, he was way more nervous than me. I think I was just thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna be pregnant anymore. Like, that's literally what I was thinking about. But he was like, he was so nervous. He jumped out of the bed, he got the bags ready, which our hospital bags were packed, but there was just a few things like toiletries and stuff like that. So we ended up leaving the house at like 3:15, which I prayed to the Lord. I was like, please do not let this labor and delivery be in the middle of the night. Our hospital is 45 minutes away, and I know, I don't know. Honestly, it was the Lord. Like, I loved the hospital that we gave birth at. Like, it was the best, and I plan on going back to the hospital because I loved it so much. But every time I tell a mom that the hospital is 45 minutes away, she would look at me like I was crazy, which I don't even know why that's a question of like, where are you giving birth? Like, a hospital, okay? Like, I don't know. So when I'd have to say I was 45 minutes away, they'd be like, okay. So yeah, we drove 45 minutes in the middle of the night, but honestly, it was the Lord because there was no traffic and the hospital was completely dead. Like, well, not dead, but you know what I mean. Nobody was there, and so it was just, I knew it was the Lord, you know? So the whole drive there, my contractions were still every 5 minutes for a minute long. Zach was able to kind of like time them, and when we got to the hospital, he was like, yeah, they're definitely every 5 minutes for a minute long. So I was like, okay, good. They should take me. Like, I should get admitted quickly, you know? That's what I was thinking. No. So we went through security at the emergency room because the main entrance to the hospital was closed, and the security guy, like, he made a joke. He was like, man, there's a lot of people giving birth tonight, you know? And I'm just sitting there like in my pajamas. Well, not my pajamas, I kind of like changed in my crusty outfit. I didn't look cute. you know. And I was like, haha, you know, like mid-contraction, like, yeah, I'm one of them, you know. And this was honestly like so embarrassing. So right in front of me was a woman giving birth, but she looked so cute. She had like a matching set on. She had cute little matching bags for her and her husband. She was scheduled for an induction, like she told the lady at the front desk that. And I'm getting rolled in a wheelchair in my crusty outfit and my bun, and I am having a contraction and I just look miserable. And I'm just like, this lady is probably so happy that this is not her. And then Zach had to get checked in and the lady just whisked me away on the wheelchair. Like, I'm just like, where did my husband just go? It doesn't sound as chaotic as I'm making it sound. It was really peaceful. Like, there really was no one there. And I remember the lady pushing me so fast because the breeze just felt really nice. But she was like, okay, you guys are giving birth, come with me. The lady getting an induction and her husband and me and the lady pushing me in the wheelchair are all in this elevator together. I'm sitting in the wheelchair, like holding my stomach, like I look crazy. And then the couple next to me, they just look so cute. And I'm just like, I wanted to be like, hey, how are you guys? You know, but I was having a contraction. And I really wish I would have said like, you guys are lucky, or like, I bet you guys are happy you didn't do what I'm doing right now. But I will say I am kind of like not for elective inductions. Not that that's what she was getting, but they offered me an induction at 39 weeks and it was just to like get it over with kind of. And I was like, no, like I feel like my body will know what to do when it's time. Don't get me wrong, if there is a reason that you need an induction, like 100%, I'm not gonna be like, oh, that's so, you know, whatever. But to get an induction just to like get the pregnancy over with, I just feel like I don't want to like push my baby out when he's not ready. Like, he'll know when he needs to come, and it just was the perfect timing. And the crazy part is there were like 3 inductions scheduled that night and I was the only one there that was just like labor started and whatever. I was the first one. Not that there's like a reward or anything, but I feel like the midwife came in and she was like, you're the first mom to give birth on this floor, yada yada, of the day, you know. And she was like, there were scheduled inductions and they're like still pushing, like, you killed it for a first time mom, all this stuff. And I just feel like your body will know when it's ready. And don't get me wrong, I'm pro medicine because like I got the epidural. Like, I am not a natural queen, I'm just not. But when it comes to like medically inducing the labor electively, like I'm just kind of like, I don't know, I feel like my body will know what to do. So I don't know what triage is, but I think that's where we were because they put me in this room. They couldn't like check me in. They had to make sure that I was actually in labor. Since I didn't have like my water break or anything, I think that's why they were just like, okay, go in this room, change, and we're just gonna check you, ask you a couple questions. I got settled in that room around 4:30 in the morning and Zach came up, he found me, and they performed a cervical check, which those are so painful. I hate them. And I was only 2 centimeters dilated, which I had been 2 centimeters dilated since 34 weeks. I could have sworn I would have been like a 3 or a 4 because of how consistent the contractions were. Like, I was like, surely these things are doing their job. No, I was still 2 centimeters. And at that point she was like, okay, you guys can go home or you can walk around the hospital for a few hours and see if that'll help progress the dilation. My heart fell. Like, honestly, that felt like both of those options sounded horrible to me. I was like, the last thing I want to do is walk around this hospital looking crazy, having contractions. Like, I was like, I don't want to do that. But I also didn't want to go home because I knew in my gut that this was the night baby boy was going to arrive, and we live 45 minutes away and I was not trying to be giving birth at my house. Okay, home births, if you do it, awesome, but that was not the birth plan for me. So she gave us time to think about it and I'm just like, babe, like, I don't want to go home. I don't want to give birth in the car. Like, I just don't want to do that. So she came back and asked us what we were going to do, and she kind of clarified that when she said walk around for a couple hours, she meant the labor and delivery unit, which changed the game for me because I was like, oh wait, yeah, like I could totally do that. It was really peaceful in there. So I was like, okay, I'll walk around for a couple of hours, see if I can get things to progress. But I was terrified because I was having contractions and they were strong and they were painful, and I was like, walking around just does not sound fun. I was shocked at how manageable the contractions were standing up and walking around and squatting and all the things. Like, laying down or sitting down made them a million times worse. I literally had a thought where I was like, oh my gosh, like I could have a natural birth one day. Like, I was like, I could do this. Like, this is so not easy, but it was manageable. Like, every time I felt one coming, I just kind of like squatted through it and was like holding on to Zach, and I was just like, man, I could totally do this, you know. It didn't last, but you know. So we walked around for a couple of hours around the unit. I like did little dances and stuff because I was like really trying to get that baby out. Then after 2 hours, it was 6:45 in the morning, so I went ahead and went back to the room because she said she'd meet us there in a couple of hours. She was late, but that was the Lord. Like, literally, I just felt the Lord all over the 30 minutes that we waited for her in the room. So while we were waiting, I was just like, babe, we need to pray. We need to put worship music on. Like, I do not want to go home if she comes back and checks me and is like, hey, you need to go home. Like, I just don't want that. So we turned worship music on and we're walking around the room, but praying in the spirit, praying over my body, like commanding it to do what it was created to do and to dilate, and like just praying over baby Theo, praying over the nurses, praying over every part of my body that would be part of labor and delivery, like basically commanding it to get ready because we're giving birth, we're not going home. So after about 20 minutes of doing that, I ended up getting super nauseous out of nowhere, which throughout the whole pregnancy, I had extreme nausea, vomiting, like it wasn't anything foreign to me, but this wave came out of nowhere and I was like, oh my gosh, like babe, give me the trash can, I'm about to throw up. So I threw up, and the pressure of like throwing up, it put pressure on my cervix. Like I swear it like pushed the baby down, and I ended up having a bloody show while I was throwing up. Not anything crazy, like I stood up and there was like a little bit of blood on the table, so I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm bleeding, like I need to go to the bathroom, whatever. And I literally felt the Lord so strong in that moment. I was like, oh my gosh, I have a feeling that happening just now was on purpose, as far as like pushing his head down on my cervix because of the pressure. So she came back at 7:20 a.m. and she checked me and I was 3 centimeters. And I just knew it was because I threw up. I don't think me walking around really did anything, to be honest. Like I know it was because of the pressure, because I didn't have a bloody show like while I was walking and squatting. It was when I threw up. So I was very thankful. I'd never been so thankful to throw up. So after she checked me at 7:20, we got checked in finally at 8 a.m. and we ended up getting the last room, which in my head, I'm like, if there's no more rooms left, like what do they do? Like, do they send you home? Like, I don't understand. So we got the last room and I just felt the Lord over everything. Like I was so excited, and we ended up getting the last room for postpartum too, which is crazy. And it was the biggest unit with like a beautiful view of the water. Like that was awesome. So thank you, Lord. So once we got checked in, I laid down, and that's when the contractions got really painful, and I realized, oh my gosh, like the reason they weren't that bad before was because I was standing up and like working through them. When you're just sitting there, they're painful. Like I was literally like gripping the side of the hospital bed, like oh my gosh, like this is so painful. Luckily you get like a 5-minute break in between each contraction, but I was just like, oh my gosh, once I'm 10 centimeters, like these are gonna be so close together. And I was planning on getting the epidural anyway, like before I went in. Like that was literally my birth plan, was epidural. So she asked me if I plan on getting it, and I was like yes, and she's like, okay, cool, I'll just go get the anesthesiologist now and let him know you're next. And I was like, praise the Lord, because I've heard stories of women asking too late or it taking a long time to get it because there's people in front of them. And so when she came back, she was like, you're next on his list, like you're good. I was like, all right, cool. Like I was very thankful that I just went ahead and was like, sign me up. And side note, me and my husband live in Florida without any family here. Like my family is 4 hours away, his family is 5 hours away. So we had a doula come, but it wasn't so much for like the natural birth reasons of like having a doula there and doing a water birth and stuff, but it really was for support. And this doula is from our church. Like we view them as spiritual mentors. Like they are the absolute greatest. And I view them as like spiritual parents, like both her and her husband. So she came and she brought snacks. She brought Zach dinner, which Zach literally almost passed out. And I'm like, babe, like I'm not even giving birth yet. Why are you faint right now? But I think it's because like we jumped out of bed and, you know, came here and he hadn't eaten anything. But she was there and she put candles around the room. She put like fairy lights up, bunch of snacks. She just set the tone and mood of the room. And I just was like so thankful to have her there. This is my first baby. Like we don't have family here. And it literally felt like I had family there for me. And it was incredible. And she was able to answer all of our questions. Like when the doctors would offer anything, like you really don't know as a first time mom unless you like doing research, which I kind of did, but ultimately didn't want to get taken advantage of. So we were able to ask Catherine a bunch of questions and she told us the pros and cons of things. Like it was incredible having her there. So at 9 a.m. I texted all of my family members that we had gotten checked in at 9 a.m., which I didn't plan on doing because I just didn't want to be like updating a bunch of people throughout the process. So I had a pre-written text already written out and I just sent it to family members and was like, once he's here, we'll let you know, because I had no idea what to expect the labor and delivery delivery if something went wrong. Like it would just be a lot to be texting back and forth and trying to give accurate updates. So I just sent a pre-written text. I highly recommend doing that, just having a text ready to let people know if you want to. You don't have to let people know, but just letting whoever you want know that you're in labor and delivery without having to like come up with a whole text. Okay, I don't know why, but the most painful part to me in this whole experience was the IV. She did the IV on my left arm. She blew my vein, and then she did the IV on my right arm, and I just was dreading the IV. I hate IVs. And the tape on my arm, honestly, the only thing I was thinking about that whole time was taking the tape off. Like I was so scared. And Zach was like, you're about to give birth. Like, why is this the only thing you're thinking about? And I'm like, the tape. Like, anyway. So that was the most painful part to me, was the IV, but to each their own. I don't know. All the nurses, all the midwives were incredible. Like they were all super sweet. Not that this matters, but they were all in their 20s besides the doctor midwife that was going to be delivering me. But all the nurses were in their 20s and they were like super fun. Like it just felt like I had a bunch of girlfriends in there and it was really funny. Like we were making jokes and they were just super sweet. So before the epidural arrived, she said that I had to be on fluids for 30 minutes and that the fluids could potentially slow down my contractions. So she hooked up I don't know if it was like water, probably, but like she hooked that up to my IV and that did indeed slow down my contractions. So the midwife, which is the main doctor, I'm just gonna call her doctor, she came in and she was like, hey, your contractions aren't looking close together. Like we need you to be able to press. Like we may need to put you on Pitocin, which I really did not want Pitocin because I've heard so many horror stories about Pitocin contractions and how they're unbearable. But at this point, I knew I was getting the epidural and I was like, I might as well just get Pitocin to speed things up. This is your own decision. This is the decision I went with. And I was like, okay, yeah, we can do Pitocin, but only after the epidural because I just was not about to be having Pitocin contractions without the epidural. The epidural, oh my gosh, thank the Lord, whoever created that incredible invention. Now I know a lot of women have had awful experiences with the epidural, so I'm not giving this blanket statement of like, oh my gosh, epidural, but I mean, yeah. So the guy, the anesthesiologist, Steven, he was the bomb. He came in and he was so funny. Like he was making jokes with me and he was like sarcastic, but like in a good way, you know, like not too much. He was just like, okay, are you ready? Like we're gonna do the epidural now. And I was like, can you count down? Like I'm really nervous. And he was like, okay, I mean, yeah, I guess we can count down. Like he was just kidding, but he was making the experience less scary because I just heard so many things about it. And so I didn't even feel anything. And it was not because the contractions were so strong, like I didn't feel anything. No, I literally felt nothing, which I've never been afraid of needles or shots or anything. So maybe that's why, but they do have you like bend over and do the whole thing. And I was like, okay, like do this. And then he was like, okay, we're done. And I was like, that's it? Like you did it? And he was like, yeah. It was so funny. So I am just so thankful that the anesthesiologist was cool, funny, making my experience a lot better. I've heard awful stories. So I was just praying like that the epidural would not only work on one side or fail multiple times. Like I've just heard so many things. And the best part, I didn't know you could get different dosages of the epidural. So he started me at the lowest one and I was able to still move and feel my legs. That was one thing I was like kind of nervous about, was not being able to move my legs or like feel my whole lower body. I felt literally my legs, I can move them. I couldn't stand, but I could feel my legs and I was just so thankful. When the epidural went in, my whole lower body went warm, but it wasn't like numb. So that was cool. Even when I gave birth, like I could still feel him coming out, but it wasn't painful. One thing he did warn me about was you could get nauseous with the epidural. So I ended up throwing up like right after the epidural was put in. But weirdly enough, like I couldn't feel anything. Like it kind of just felt like something, this is TMI, you're watching this, but it kind of just felt like something coming out of my mouth. And I think it was because I couldn't feel like the pressure on my stomach because of the epidural. So it was like the most peaceful vomiting ever. It sounds weird. And especially after 9 months of throwing up constantly, like I was just kind of like, it kind of just came out and then it was done and I was like, okay, I'm fine. You know, like it was just, I can't explain it, but I did throw up after getting the epidural multiple times. And another thing that I did not know is that you cannot eat with the epidural. You can only be on a clear liquid diet. So they came in and brought me water, little ice chips, and they brought me like this clear soup. It was disgusting. I literally, as soon as I ate it, I threw it up. up. It was so gross. At that point, I hadn't slept in probably over 24 hours. So I was able to take a nap after getting the epidural. My body was so relaxed. And they actually had a peanut ball there, which was awesome. So I just took a nap with a peanut ball. I just put my leg over the top, took a nap, and it was great. It was so peaceful. Like, I was just super relaxed, and I'm like, and it was just weird, like thinking, oh my gosh, I'm about to have a baby like today. It was crazy. So at 2:45, I was 5 centimeters dilated. My water hadn't broken yet, so they went ahead and broke it to speed things up. And then I took another nap with a peanut ball. So after that nap, which was like an hour later, she came back and she was like, we can't track the baby's heartbeat because of the positions you're laying in. So we want to do internal monitoring, which I don't know why, but something in me kind of like freaked out when she said that. I just didn't want more tubes and cords and things attached to me. So I was like, okay, can we think about it? Like, what are the pros and cons? Which is really just monitoring his heartbeat internally, like up there. But I, for some reason, just like didn't want to do that. So they left the room and we kind of like talked things out with the doula and Zach. And I was just like, I don't know why, but something in me just doesn't feel like I want to do that.
Okay, I look crazy because I'm editing this, but literally I saw something on Facebook about internal monitoring on like the baby. It leaves a mark on their head. It literally like clips into their head while they're in you, leaves a mark in their head. And a bunch of comments were like, my baby still has a mark to this day and they're 8 years old. They have a bald spot. Like, I didn't even look it up. I just had a feeling in my gut to not do that. So yeah, I'm happy I didn't do that.
She was concerned because she was like, we're not able to track his heartbeat or your contractions because the monitors were not like staying on my stomach. And so she was like, that being said, we don't want to give you more Pitocin to speed things up because we can't keep track of his heartbeat, which I don't know if she was wanting to give me Pitocin to like speed things up for her. I don't really know, but I know that's a thing where the doctors can kind of rush you, which definitely advocate for yourself. But I just felt so loopy and out of it. And I was just kind of like, okay, give us time to think about it and talk about it. So they came back 15 minutes later and she was like, did you guys decide like we should probably do internal monitoring? In my head, I wanted to be like, can you just check me first? Because you haven't checked me in an hour and a half. Like, you don't know what things are looking like. But she ended up saying like, but let me just check you and see where you're at. So they checked me. It was the doctor in the room and like 2 other midwives or 2 other nurses. Her jaw drops and she looks at the 2 nurses next to her and she's like, she's at a 9.5. A 9.5. Like, literally everybody in the room was like, what? Like, are you serious? And I looked at everyone and I was like, you're kidding. I literally was like, you guys are kidding. So the doula is laughing, like all the nurses are laughing because we did not expect me to be at a 9.5. I don't know what did it. I don't know if it was breaking my water. I don't know if it was me taking the nap with the peanut balls, but they were like, yeah, you're like about ready to push in like 30 minutes. So I was just like, okay, cool. And at this point I was still so relaxed and I was like, this is crazy. Like, movies make birth look so scary and I was waiting for that to happen to me kind of, but it was just the most relaxing experience. Like, if I knew it was gonna be like that for every single baby, I would give birth so many more times. Like, it was just funny. Like, I felt like I was laughing and having a good time. Like, anyway, so I went ahead and took another nap for like 30 to 45 minutes. And when I woke up, the nurse looked at me and she was like, well, you're ready to push, like if you want to push. And I was like, okay. Like, it was just weird. Like, I looked at Zach and I was like, this is it. Like, I'm about to give birth. And he's like, yeah. He was more nervous than me. It was so funny. Like, I feel like I kept having to like comfort him, like, babe, this is so fun. But I think like I was on the medicine, so I was super loopy, kind of like, ooh, this is so much fun. Not loopy, like I was still aware, but I was just super calm and relaxed. So now it's time for the delivery part. So with the contractions, I could feel my belly like get hard, but it wasn't painful. It just felt like pressure. Little man's starting to wake up. I might have to go get him. Let me go get him. Hello. Good morning. He's probably hungry. Hey, hello. My little baby. Okay, I'm just feeding him, so sorry if you hear gulps and noises. It's just Theo eating. Yeah. So I could feel my stomach get hard, but there wasn't any pain. That being said, you do have to push with your contractions when you're giving birth. So they were able to tell me when to push, but I honestly would feel my stomach starting the contractions. So I was like, is it time to push? And they like looked at the monitor and they're like, yep, it's time to push. So I pushed for an hour. It felt like forever. I feel like that's still forever, but they were like, wow, that was so fast. Like, good job, you did great. First time moms usually take forever. That felt like forever to me. And in my head, I still feel like an hour is a long time because yeah, it's a long time. And on that last push, they all were like, okay, this is the last push, you can do this. I'm sorry, am I being too loud? And they were like, okay, this is the last push, you can do this. And I remember looking at Zach standing right next to me above me, and I'm like, is this the last one? Is this the last one? Because at that point, it just felt so surreal. Like I was like, this is it. Like we're about to have a baby. And then baby Theo was born. He was 7 pounds, 3 ounces, 21 inches long. I never thought I'd be like one of those parents who remembered the birth weight and everything, but I think it's just something you remember for the rest of your life. And I was just like, oh, it was crazy feeling him come out. Like I could feel him come out. Even with the epidural, I felt his head, I felt his shoulders, his legs. And it was just the craziest feeling ever. When he came out, all the nurses were like, open your eyes, because I was closing them because I was pushing. And I just opened my eyes and he was there looking at me. Like they put him on my chest and he had the biggest cone head ever, but it was like, they're like, that'll go to normal after. And I'm like, okay. And it was just the most incredible experience ever. Like would totally do again. It just felt like this is what my body was made to do. Like it was just crazy. Yeah. And that's the story of how you got here. Yeah, that's the story. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching my birth story about baby Theo. If you want to hear anything about my postpartum and just how motherhood's been, make sure to subscribe. So yeah, you should subscribe and watch my mom. Say bye. Say bye.